Should she be banned from future family events? The words weren't even said with malice, just amusement. Belle's voice rang out like she was suggesting a party game, like I was a menu item they'd grown tired of ordering. I sat at the end of the long dining table, the last chair on the left, where Micah used to sit beside me. Now it was just me and Luca clinging to my arm like he could hold me in place by sheer will. Hands went up, one after another. Carol, her mouth tight with that fake sadness she wore like lip gloss. Robert, his eyes blank as the television he never stopped watching. Then the cousins, the spouses, people I hadn't spoken to all night. Even Levi's parents, who still owed me for the hospital bills I covered when Levi broke his arm 2 summers ago. Even them. All of them. Except one. Grandpa Joe didn't move. His hand stayed firmly on his cane, knuckles white, jaw clenched. I saw the way he looked at Belle, like he didn't recognize her. My body went numb. Luca looked around the room, his little face contorting into a confusion he couldn't mask. "Mom," he whispered, tugging at my sleeve. "Why are they doing this?" I didn't answer. Because I couldn't say, because I'm not Micah, and without him, I'm disposable. I couldn't say, because they never saw me as anything but his plus one. Instead, I stood up slowly, ignoring the way my legs trembled. I smoothed my dress with one hand, the other gripping Luca's. "Thank you for dinner," I said. My voice was calm, maybe even too calm. Controlled, like a dam right before it bursts. No one stopped us. No one spoke. No one looked me in the eye. As we walked out, Grandpa Joe rose, slow and steady. He reached out and placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "You don't deserve this," he said, his voice trembling more than his fingers. I didn't speak. I just nodded. In the car, Luca didn't cry. He just leaned his head against my arm and held onto my sleeve like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. That night, after tucking him into my bed and lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling for hours. I could still see Belle's smirk, the gleam in her eyes when she said my name like it was a curse word. I could still hear the silence that followed the vote, a silence louder than any scream. They had voted me out of a family I helped hold together. Voted me out like I was a threat, not a mother, not a grieving widow, not a woman doing her best. But I wasn't going to scream. Not yet. I was going to be silent. Silent like the pull of a bowstring. Waiting. Tight. Until it snapped. And when it did, it wouldn't be noise they'd hear. It would be consequence. After my husband died, they slowly deleted me from their lives. At first, it was subtle, like a gentle retreat. Belle brought over casseroles that smelled like lavender and store-bought pity. Carol hugged me with one arm while the other still clutched her phone. Robert offered to mow my lawn whenever I had too much on my plate, which I later realized was code for, "until you stop being our problem." But back then, I clung to every crumb of kindness like it was proof I still belonged. Sundays used to be sacred. Micah would grill barefoot, a beer in one hand, and Luca on his shoulders. Grandpa Joe played old Johnny Cash tunes while the cousins shrieked over water balloons. I'd bring my famous garlic knots, and Belle would pretend not to hate that everyone liked them better than her kale slaw. Those Sundays were messy, loud, imperfect, home. Then came the silence. After the funeral, the invitations stopped. At first, I thought it was the grief. Too raw, too loud, too much of Micah in every corner. But as weeks bled into months, the distance solidified. Texts got shorter. Replies took longer. And when I offered to host Luca's birthday that year, Carol suggested maybe a small celebration at their house would be more manageable. Manageable. I knew what that meant. They were managing me, or rather, managing to phase me out. The group chats I used to be in, gone. Family dinners I used to help plan, forgotten. They didn't even ask for my garlic knots anymore. And the cruelest part? They didn't say a word. Not a fight. Not a falling out. Just a slow, cold fade like I was a stain they were gently scrubbing out of their perfect holiday photos. I remember one day, scrolling through Belle's Instagram. She'd posted a photo of a big family barbecue. Carol smiling beside Robert, kids everywhere, paper lanterns strung across the backyard. Luca's cousins playing tag around the grill. My heart stopped, because Luca wasn't there, and no one had told us. I showed the picture to Micah's old shirt I still wore to bed some nights. We weren't even an afterthought, I whispered. Luca asked once, so innocently, why doesn't Grandma call us anymore? I stared at his face, those dimples that mirrored Micah's, and said, maybe they're just busy. But we both knew better. They weren't busy. They were done. Without Micah, I was a closed chapter, an echo of someone they loved, and that echo had grown inconvenient. Still, I didn't fight. Not yet. I tried to tell myself it was better this way. Less tension, less walking on eggshells. But one Thursday evening, Belle's name flashed across my screen. Family dinner Sunday. Would be nice to see you and Luca. I reread the message 5 times. And then I made the biggest mistake of all. I said yes. It felt like bait. But Luca wanted to go. His eyes lit up the moment I told him. We're going to Grandma's? He asked, already bouncing on the balls of his feet like hope had suddenly grown legs inside him. And in that moment, I ignored every instinct in my body screaming no, because I wanted it to be true. I wanted to believe this was a real invitation, not another performance. We arrived 10 minutes early. Their house was magazine perfect. Not a pillow out of place, not a speck of dust. A family frozen in porcelain. Belle opened the door like a hostess welcoming a guest to a charity gala, her arms wrapped around me in a lavender-scented hug that felt more like a warning. You look amazing, she smiled, brushing my cheek. You've held up really well. I should have turned around then. Instead, I watched Luca disappear into the house, laughter trailing behind him like a ribbon. I followed, slower. Carol was in the kitchen, slicing lemons with precision. She didn't look up, didn't pause, didn't speak. Robert was on the couch, glued to the game, nodding once before his attention snapped back to the screen like I'd never entered. They hadn't set a place for me at the kids' table. But that's where they put Luca, and that's when the small things started piling up. A cold hello here, a joke I wasn't part of there, a salad bowl shoved into my hands, but no invitation to the conversation around it. The kind of exclusion you can't prove, but you feel in your bones. I smiled anyway. I'd gotten good at that, pretending I didn't notice being erased. Dinner came. Conversations danced around the table, promotions, vacations, school updates. I sat quietly, a ghost at the feast. No one asked how Luca was doing in school. No one asked me if I was still writing. I passed bread. I refilled water. I made myself small. Only Grandpa Joe acknowledged me. He sat beside me, slow and steady, and handed me a piece of bread like it was an offering. I'm glad you're here, he said, low and true. Luca needs this. I don't think they agree, I whispered. They're not the ones that matter, he replied, and somehow I held back tears. I thought that would be the hardest part, until the plates cleared and Belle stood up. She tapped her glass, the clink cutting through the air like a bell at judgment. I think we need to talk about the tension in this family, she began, and my stomach twisted. At first, I thought she meant something else, maybe a cousin feud, maybe Carol's control issues. But then she turned to me. I think it's fair to say things haven't felt the same since Era rejoined us. The room shifted, breaths held, eyes dropped. I'm not trying to stir drama, she added, which of course meant she was. But maybe, just maybe, for the sake of peace, we should vote. A simple show of hands. Should Era be uninvited from future family events? The spoon in my hand dropped, and that was when Luca walked back into the room. He just wanted a second slice of cake, but he walked into a vote to erase us. I didn't hear him come up the stairs. I was too busy trying to breathe while watching hands rise like knives in the air, each one carving out my place in this family, each one saying, you don't belong here. Carol, Robert, Levi's parents, even Belle's husband, who couldn't look me in the eye. One by one, they lifted their hands like it meant nothing, like I wasn't sitting right there, like Luca wasn't still part of their blood. And then, Luca's voice. Mom, he asked, his head barely peeking around the corner. Why are they doing this? Every muscle in my body snapped taut. His eyes darted between the hands, still raised, and my face. He didn't understand. He couldn't. He was just a child, still believing that grown-ups made things better, not worse. Still trusting that love meant something you could count on. I stood up. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just looked at every single person who had voted me out, who had betrayed Micah's memory, who had made my son an outsider in the home he used to run barefoot through. "Thank you for dinner," I said, my voice low, steady. Not because I was calm, but because I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Luca reached for my hand. I gripped his tighter than I should have. He leaned into me without saying a word, like he knew, on some deep, unspoken level, that something had cracked in the foundation of his world. We turned to leave, and that's when Grandpa Joe stood up. He was slow, his cane clicking against the tile like punctuation. He walked toward us, ignoring the stares, the silence, the shame hanging in the air like smoke. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't deserve this," he whispered. "Neither does he." I nodded once, swallowed the lump in my throat, and walked us both out the front door. In the car, Luca sat quietly, his fingers wrapped around the hem of my sleeve. He didn't ask another question. He didn't cry. He just leaned his head against my arm and breathed. That night I lay awake for hours. I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the rise and fall of Luca's breath beside me. And I knew. Belle had planned it. The timing, the wording, the audience. She hadn't just wanted me gone. She wanted me erased. But she made one mistake. She thought silence was surrender. She didn't know I still had everything. The messages, the photos, the voice memos, and one recording I'd forgotten even existed, from Luca's smartwatch. They thought I was weak. They didn't know I had proof. While Luca slept beside me, one small hand still clutching the edge of my shirt like I might vanish overnight, I opened my laptop for the first time in months. Not for emails, not for job applications, but for war. I dug through old texts, messages from Belle that once sounded like awkward suggestions but now screamed like veiled threats. "You don't have to come to Luca's recital. It might be awkward for everyone. Carol says it's better if you just drop him off." Each one was a cut I hadn't felt until now. Then came the audio. Luca's smartwatch had automatically recorded the dinner, every word, every vote, every smirk in Belle's voice as she delivered her sentence. I sat in the dark, headphones in, listening to my own humiliation on loop. Then I heard it. "She's too weak to fight back anyway." I paused the recording. My hand was trembling, but not with sadness, with clarity. By sunrise, I'd sent an inquiry to a law firm that specialized in emotional harassment, family exclusion, and psychological harm to minors. I didn't expect anyone to respond quickly. Danica Rhodes called me in less than 12 hours. She didn't flinch as I laid it all out. Every manipulation, every message, every moment they made Luca feel like a ghost. She didn't pity me. She didn't offer comforting cliches. She offered options. "This isn't just cruelty," she said. "It's calculated harm, and that's actionable." We drafted a cease and desist letter, but not just any letter. This was a full dossier, screenshots, audio transcriptions, timestamps, context, everything. Each envelope, sealed and signed by Rhodes and Keene Family Law, went out 2 days later, one for every person who raised their hand against me. Delivered at 9 a.m. sharp on a Thursday. By noon, the panic started. Missed call from Carol. Voicemail from Robert. "This has gone too far, Ira." 2 text messages from Belle, one demanding answers, the other calling me dramatic. I didn't reply, because it wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. Inside the letter, Danica's tone was ice. It outlined the emotional harm to Luca, the systemic exclusion of a grieving widow, the defamation of character, and the psychological toll. It highlighted Belle's exact words in bold. "She's too weak to fight back." And it warned them. One more hostile act, one more attempt to isolate Luca or me, and we'd escalate to Child Protective Services, formal filings, and supervised access only. No one questioned the evidence, because they knew it was real. The next day, a handwritten card appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, "Maybe we were wrong about you." Signed, Carol. I tucked it away, right next to my wedding ring. And that weekend, for the first time in a long time, Luca didn't ask about them. He asked if we could go to the beach, and I said yes. What I didn't tell him was that I wasn't done yet, because Belle still thought this was over. Silence used to be my peacekeeping tool. Now, it's my power. I no longer rehearse polite replies in my head. I don't wonder what Carol might say or if Belle will twist my words into something sharp. I wake up and there's quiet, not the kind that hurts, but the kind that feels earned, the kind that holds space. Every Sunday, Luca and I walk the lake trail behind our apartment. He brings his sketchbook, I bring coffee. Sometimes we talk about planets and comic books. Sometimes we don't say anything at all. And that's okay. There's peace in not having to fill every silence with survival. Grandpa Joe still visits every Saturday. He plays chess badly with Luca and brings sugar cookies he's not supposed to eat. We never talk about the others. He never asks, and I never offer. It's an unspoken agreement. The past stays in the drawer with Carol's letter and my wedding ring. I haven't forgiven them. Not because I'm holding on to bitterness, but because they never asked. Because no one stood up but Grandpa Joe. Because no one ran after me. Because they voted. And in doing so, they told Luca, without a word, that his mother didn't matter. And maybe I'll never be ready to forgive that. I don't hate them. I just don't make space for them anymore. The hardest part of healing isn't the rage, it's the remembering. The ordinary moments that should have been safe, but weren't. The birthdays, the school plays, the way Luca used to check the mailbox for cards that never came. He stopped doing that now. Instead, he draws superheroes that look a lot like him. Brave, soft-spoken, and kind. He says the cape isn't for flying, it's for protection. And I think he understands something most grown-ups never do. You don't have to scream to be strong. You just have to choose not to shrink. Some people say I overreacted, that it was just a vote, just a dinner, just a family. But if you've ever sat quietly in a room full of people who decided you were too inconvenient to include, then you know. You know how loud that silence can be. You know how deep it cuts when they smile while erasing you. And if you know that feeling, truly know it, then maybe this story wasn't just mine. Maybe it's yours too. And if it was, then I hope you'll share it in the comments. Or like this video, not because I asked, but because for once, someone said what you've been holding in. Maybe even hit subscribe, so you'll never have to hear these stories alone again. Because we don't need a room full of people to belong. We just need one place where we're heard.